Hey, we're back again dealing with anger resolution. This is C.O.R.E programs, which stands for Center of Our Relationship Experiences. My experience has been, and my training has been, and my more my experience than my training, is that the heart is the reflection of our thoughts. It's the part of us that expresses. It's the part of us where our spirit dwells, and our soul is that part, that interface that we operate through. And we're dealing with anger resolution, which I've said before, just as a reminder, if you're just tapping into this now, there's a whole series of podcasts that we are doing that'll help take this apart. But we've talked about how, we are our information. And whatever information we have, that's what we're operating on. We can't pretend we have something we don't have. We don't act like we have information we don't have. We shouldn't pretend that we're farther along than where we're at. And at the same time, when you do an assessment of yourself, which is very healthy to do, to have self-reflection and really know where you're at, you will find that there's some areas when it comes to dealing with anger resolution or just processing life in general that you'll feel like when you have a memory come up, or you will take something on that's, an experience in the now, all of a sudden you'll feel younger than your age group. And it can be a scary feeling, let's just say it that way. So we're actually going to talk about, in anger resolution, we're going to talk about the child within. I talk about a little bit different. Books call it the child within. I call it arrested in development. But I want to share a few things first before we get into that. 1 Corinthians 13:11 says, "When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child, or reasoned like a child, and I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things." So part of maturing is, when someone has matured because they literally took the childish things, the immature things, the things that are not fully developed or whatever, and it almost looks like they put them away and took on a different behavior. But literally, you just grow out of those childish things. And this is a concept that is so true, and the Bible talks about it, right? Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he grows up, he will not depart from it." That's such a positive thing when you're doing positive stuff, right? But it's such a negative thing when we do negative stuff. And if you think about that, it's like if I train up a child in a very negative way through trauma, abuse, and sick words or sick behaviors or those types of things, I'm literally training them up to not function right. And when we don't function right, we act younger than our age group. And we'll explain in a little bit how that works. The original Hebrew says, "Train up a child in the ways of Jehovah." That's the God of covenant. And when he grows whiskers. Okay, this is talking about a man, but this also applies to women. Not that we want to grow whiskers. It happens. But that as we're coming to maturity, we're trained in the ways of Jehovah. We will have a foundation on which to build life. And some of us are suffering anger issues because we want certain things to stop. We didn't get the memo on other things. And part of it really is our frustration, really is we feel younger than our age group. We didn't get a chance to mature into certain things. And yet it's like being asked to climb a mountain and you're in a wheelchair. It gives you that feeling. And life doesn't have grace for us, if you notice. You're having a really bad day, you're feeling younger than your age group, you can sense your immaturities, whatever. We don't get to just get off the ride. The bills still have to be paid. The children still have to be taken care of. We have to be taking care of ourselves even. We can't just get off the ride. And so it doesn't cause us to be able to say, life doesn't say to us, "That's okay, just take a break. I know you went through a lot of stuff, just take another 10 days, be sweet." But part of maturing is the pressure stays on us and we have to figure it out. We have to come up, right? Now, you need to know this. Before the age of about 8.5 to 9 years old, these three chemicals are missing from the brain. So remember we said in anger resolution and all the things we teach at C.O.R.E. is we want to work with how God made us. We don't want to come against how he made us. That's when things flow the best. So we have to understand how he made us. Before the ages of 8.5 to 9 years old, these three chemicals are missing from the brain. Serotonin is not operating at a high level at all in that age group. And dopamine is that reward system is there, but it's not a high level. It's just really missing. Norepinephrine is also something that's missing from the brain. So between the ages of 8.5 to 9 years old, these chemicals activate and change the structure of the child along with changing thought process. So as these things are kicking in, your body takes on different shape. Your thought processes take on different shape. You shouldn't squirrel as much. This is say it that way. I mean, a toddler will be like, oh, here, oh, there, but as you get older, it's like we don't ramble on with certain things. We bring a thought to close. It helps us have the ability to bring a thought to close. And if this gets disrupted and now we're 40 years old and we still can't bring our thoughts to closure, we have to go back and visit some things and close that out so that these chemicals can do the job that they need to do. Being without these chemicals causes the child to stay teachable, and he and she stays in a training mode. So what happens is under the age of 10, technically, we're in what's called the age of directives. In the age of directives, we take direction. That's the age we're at, right? And we don't have all those chemicals in place dominating the brain. What's happening is the brain stays very teachable. And so really when you have a child, when you're carrying a child in your womb, the baby's recording even in your womb, the computer of the brain records. It's so important to know that, a baby in the womb can tell if they're wanted. I mean, I'm just saying. And so everything records doesn't mean they understand what's being recorded, but later on as they're born and they get older, they'll have that sensation in their body. If they weren't wanted, that'll stay in the brain. So it's important that we know that. By the grace of God, we can raise kids, right? And love them. And so here we are, we have this going on, and we're recording everything. And the recordings are that teachable mode because between 26 and 30 is when the main foundational pathways of the brain have now said, okay, we have a working system as a foundation. We can actually build on that. Just like building a house, you got to build that main foundation. And so all the recordings of being teachable, that during that time, not that you're not teachable after that, but you're highly teachable. This is why if you want to learn an instrument, always easier under the age of 10 to get that started. Always easier to get something started, whether it be, a second language. Way easier because the brain is so porous and it's going, all right, give it to me. I'll imitate that. Just like the scripture says to imitate our Father who is in heaven. We imitate that, right? So, and as we cross over to closer to 13 years old, then we cross from the age of directives into the age where we start to take that main foundational stuff that we're learning, still stay learning, because we're still not at the highest level of those chemicals, but the chemicals in the brain kick in at a higher rate. And suddenly we have, like, junior hires are many times confused because you feel like you're close to being an adult, but you still feel like a little kid all at the same time. It's a very frustrating time. A lot of people, if I ask them, what age group would you go back to? I don't think I've ever had anyone say, I would just love to go back to junior high. It was such a time, because it's very, very much confusing. You'll think, I need to be able to decide for myself, but I need mom. All at the same time, I need to draw some lines on this. I'm taking charge of this, but where's dad? It's that kind of feeling. And then as these chemicals keep going and you keep building that foundation, later on you'll say, okay, according to what I learned, I still need advice. I still need to have someone walk alongside of me, but I'm taking more initiative on my own. right? If this gets interrupted by drugs, alcohol, abuse, trauma of any form, abandonment, anything like that, it messes with the brain's ability to start something and finish it. So sometimes I see in counseling, and I can remember having some of this myself, where my thought patterns were rushing so much around because of everything I had been through, that if I wrote a story, I'd forget to put punctuations in the story. And I remember my teacher saying, it sounds like you're just, you're not taking a breath and you're just going on and on. So she would do it as an example. She'd take my story and she'd say, she'd read it, but she'd skip any period at the end or exclamation points or whatever. So you don't get a breath. You just keep going, because those things are to mark the end of a sentence. And it's a goal of our brain in maturity to have a thought and have that period, that exclamation point, that whatever at the end, or have a thought and comma and add something to that thought and then period. It's a part of maturity, where if you listen to a baby when they start to talk, it's babbled, and it all runs together. 2 years old, many times it runs together. You have to actually translate 2-year-old language. They're talking so fast that you feel like if you could slow it down, you'd get what they're saying. They are talking in sentences, but there's no punctuation. They just ramble. And part of the brain maturing is to take a thought and finish it. This is why sometimes we have so many projects, but we never finish them, because there's something going on inside of us that's younger than our age group, and the brain hasn't had a chance to develop in that area. And we could be 50 years old. And it's difficult then to break that habit, because our main foundational pathways were built like that. And so now the expectation inside of us is really not to finish whenever we start anything. And so finishing the thought is a sign of maturity. So these chemicals kick in, and yet Matthew 18:3 says, I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So even understanding the kingdom of God versus the kingdom of heaven versus just relationship with him, it can be misconstrued in our mind, because it is the thought of, where did you come from? Where are you now? And where will you go when you die? See, then there's got to be a punctuation at the end of your sentence, at the end of your life. And when we don't have that wisdom way of thinking, something got interrupted when we were under the age of 10 especially, or didn't continue to develop, 13, 14, 15 years old. And now here we are, adults, and adults meaning 30 and up, according to scripture, and 30 and up according to the brain, where it's developed and it's not done. It always needs to stay teachable, stretchable. The neuroplasticity in your brain has to be able to stretch to new concepts. It just gets harder as you get older to stretch to those concepts. You have to really decide, I'm starting something new, and I'm going to have a punctuation at the end of that sentence. I am going to finish it. Where many times we stop growing, we stop changing, and we just settle, like say you just settle at like 35 years old. Well, guess that's how it's going to be. And we are not open to change. This is where you see older people, they'll sit in the same spot at a restaurant, order the same thing, sit at the same spot in church, and they get really upset if you move them, because that's their spot. Because the brain is already shutting down its neuroplasticity, its ability to stretch, to keep trying new things, to keep us in a constant change, a constant thing that says, I always want to learn. I always want to stay teachable. Matthew 18:3, I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like little children, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. So for us to even gain salvation, we could have been taught there is no God. We could have been taught, he's abusive or whatever the thing is. And then we get older, and now we're supposed to open our mind up to there is a God, and he loves me, and he wants to take care of me. And you have to stretch to that because your brain's already shutting down saying, I don't know. I think I know enough about life already. We don't need to start something new or whatever. And yet, when we receive Christ, and that doesn't mean, he comes as a gift in the mail. It just means that you say, yes, I believe he's the Son of the living God. And I believe I started somewhere and came from somewhere. And now I'm in the now, and I got to live this life because I'm headed somewhere. Is given unto man once to die. Right? We're headed somewhere. Ain't nobody getting out of it. And the brain stretches to be able to stay teachable and fluid all the way up until the point we leave our body. It's the shutdown is us saying, I'm going to stay immature in most areas. You can be a rocket scientist and you can always learn something new. Every day we should be reading, we should be doing all kinds of things that add to our brain, stretching it, right? And so the word child here in that scripture means humble, lowly, teachable, trusting, and forgiving. Now, if you look at the brain itself, the neuroplasticity in your soul, in your mind, will, and emotions can stretch to that. You still stay fluid. Guess what makes it not fluid? I got hurt and I'm bitter. I got hurt and I'm not moving. I'm holding a grudge. I'm going to hold my ground. I'm going to be consumed by this thing that happened to me and I ain't moving. As soon as that happens, the chemicals in your brain react different. You stop growing because your world and your worldview is that you're not safe. So we take all of our time, space, and energy in our brain to make ourselves safe. Well, when you do that, you stop growing. And you stop really wanting to learn. You stop wanting to see a bigger picture. We don't want to think about heaven or hell. We don't really want to think about where we came from. We just want to think about the now. And the more that we're able to be supportive to how faith works, remember I said we have a faith brain? Well, that faith brain is always growing and moving, and you're getting to access different parts of the brain you didn't 20 years ago. You're adding to it. This is why in nursing homes, we just need to understand this because this is our physical body and we're trying to work with it, right? Not come against it. In nursing homes, they will take little kid videos and play those for people who lost their speech or different things like that. So there's movement. So there's something. They play cards. There's things that say, let's not just sit here. Let's keep the brain trying to achieve something, trying to learn something. It's very healthy for the brain to be able to do that. And it teaches your brain to retain the things that are there, that you've taken in. So the brain says, all right, I guess we're staying working. But as soon as you start to remove that and you start to get in a rote, which turns into a rut, in essence, you then rot. It brings you to this place where now you're in such a rut, you're going to rot. And we don't want to be that. We want to stay learning. And it says in Matthew 18:6, but if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and he'd be drowned in the depths of the sea. What does that have to do with anything we're talking about? Well, that's just describing biblically how strong God looks at sinning against little kids, sinning against anybody, sinning against yourself or someone sinning against you. When you're in those teachable moments as you were growing up, then that lie becomes such truth to you. It becomes your new truth. And it very well could be a lie from the pit of hell. And your life starts running off of this lie. And when that happens, it creates a block in the brain. We call them glitches. And those glitches are areas that says, I'm just going to have to shut down this part of the computer, this part of the memory base, because that was way too much information. The way he hurt me, the way she touched me, the way all of these different things took place, the abandonment I experienced, the hate toward me. I didn't have the information under the age of 10 especially. We don't have the information to work through a death, work through abandonment or beatings or any of those types of things. It's hard enough for adult brains to deal with that, let alone here you have teach me, teach me, teach me. We're in this mode, and what we're being taught is pain and trauma and abuse. Well, then we get to be older, and the brain component hasn't changed how it works in these areas. And now we know how to act like a 30-year-old, but we don't feel like a 30-year-old. And that's a scary way to live. Everybody suffers this because we've all been touched by sin, or we participated in it, and it shock and awes the brain. And literally the brain just goes, whoa, that was way too much information. Unless I have permission, safety, and new information, I can't move on from this thought. And so it almost like builds a barrier around it and says, here's the glitch. We're going to have to reroute and go around that. We'll come back and deal with that at a different time. And most of us don't, right? And so that glitch says, I can only grow 18 to 24 months emotionally past the state of the thing that occurred. We only grow 18 to 24 months past that thing. So if you were hurt at 9 years old, you might be 11 at most in that spot, in that area. You could be the CEO of a company and act like a 6-year-old. And yet if that button in the brain gets touched, if that area where you have not brought closure to it gets touched and comes up, you're going to relive that memory, but you're not going to do it as a 6-year-old. It's never been dealt with, remember? It's that glitch that kind of just has something formed around it that says, I guess we're just in stasis waiting for this to be dealt with. Wonder what it's going to be dealt with. And we'll have that there like that. But yet when we're 60 years old, that thing gets triggered in the brain. The way that we recall the sensation in our body is at the age group, or 18 to 24 months past the age group that the trauma occurred. So if you're 4 and something very traumatic happened and nobody gave you permission to grow, they didn't bring you to safety, and you got no information as how to move on, you're going to feel 6 years old at best when it comes to that subject. This is why you'll see people with very successful businesses, but they can't do relationship. Or they'll be successful in relationship in a certain area, but when it comes to the trust area or responsibility area or whatever, there's something that's still younger than their age group, and they'll literally act younger than their age group. I have. So have you. We've all been touched by sin. That's how I know that is so true. And so here we are. God's telling us we got to become teachable. Oh, it's tough when you're 50 years old and you first got to be like, I guess I got to become teachable. But I already know how to do this. I already know how to be in life. I know pride cometh before a fall. And it's pride that's covering the shame of what happened. And when the pride says, stay in front of the shame like a shield, because I don't want to re-experience the shame, then we create this whole shield that is supposed to protect us. And all it's doing is keeping us younger than our age group. I hope that makes sense to you. It's very important that we note that and that we understand. So some people call that the child within. I call it arrested in development, because really you were supposed to develop line upon line, concept or precept upon precept, which the Bible says that, right? So the word precept is command upon command. See, part of how children learn is having structure and rules and, hey, we're not doing this and this is why, and all of that's coming in. We're supposed to stay teachable to that. But as we get older, those chemicals that now kicked in at 13 years old, around 13, that's the starting toward adulthood. It said, I'm in charge. I know what I'm doing. I don't need my parents. It'll do that. And if there's nobody there giving accountability or structure or whatever, we can end up being a 6-year-old who can't take being around authority, don't want to process anything, can't communicate correctly. We act our temper comes out in a way where, like little kids will throw sand in another kid's face. They'll kick a truck. They'll do whatever. Well, we'll think, well, I'm an adult. I don't do that. Yeah, but you did kick the dog on the way out and slammed the door and then drove down the road 100 miles an hour. Well, that's because I was mad. No, that's because you were acting like the age group you were feeling. You were acting like a child in an adult's body. And most of the time we don't hold adults accountable like that. We'll just be like, it's a bad temperament. Well, we talked about how we're tempered, and you can go back and listen to those podcasts. So without being redundant, we have to look at the fact that when we're adults, if we have childlike behaviors, we got to call a spade a spade. If we're going to get over this anger issue, this rage issue, we have to call a spade a spade. It touched something in my heart that caused me to relive something that wasn't settled, and I acted younger than my age group. How young did I act? Well, people who are around kids a lot can see those different age groups. So if you're not, then it's a little bit tougher to see. But it's interesting how at 2 years old, that's the no, yes, no, mine. All of those different things are us learning how to get up into power, because between 2 and 3 years old kicks in the age of industry. The age of industry is like we're moving sand from one cup to the next. Kids could do that in a sandbox for half an hour. They can sit there and move it and then pour it back. It's their brain is kicking in where it's growing pathways. And so if you're arrested in development around 2 years old, you just keep repeating certain behaviors, but we don't have the ability then to move on. Now, if you were abused between 2 and 3 years old, that's the age of industry. Those are the people that really have an easy time sticking to a task or a job, because their industry was so important to them and abuse took place, and it interrupted their ability to be excited about industry, to be excited about projects or cleaning or anything like that, touching things, learning about things. Their excitement is now like, I don't care. And so you can be 50 years old and still feel like that 2-year-old who's saying, I don't care. I don't trust my surroundings. This is all going to turn out negative. I'm only going to get corrected anyway, so I don't care. See what I'm saying? So when it comes to being arrested in development, how does that play into anger resolution? If we can't see ourselves and that we're acting younger than our age group, we won't be able to get to the core of it, to where that relationship experience area, the very center of our heart, said, here's the things that were recorded, and I guess I am acting younger than my age group, and I need to get new information, regret the old way, and actually head toward making a change. And when you're older, like 40, 50, 60 years old and up, if you're already feel like you're set in your ways, then we say the word repent. It's tough stuff. A lot of times kids will say, okay, I'm sorry, but what is it that we should do? Because they're still in a teachable mode, and you give them an alternative way. They keep moving. I see it as, a lot of times people 45 years old, sometimes younger, whatever, a new thing comes along that they have to resolve. They're not excited about change. It annoys the crud out of you. You're like, why do I have to change? I mean, it's not me, it's them. I mean, it's really difficult to get to the altar, to get on our knees and say, God, I'm sorry. Or get to a place where you're like, I'm sorry, honey, I guess I need to change. Very difficult at that age to do that. But it's doable. Otherwise, God would not call us to it. He told us to imitate him. Be imitators of God, it says. And so if I don't know how to do this, I just got to imitate him until I know the ways. And then if my heart, my soul, my brain doesn't want to participate in that, I do it anyway. It's called obedience. And it feels like you're dying inside, which is called dying to yourself, when you have to grow, when you feel like you're already a grown person. Like I've had people sit in counseling and be like, by golly, I'm a grown man. Don't tell me what to do. Well, your body has grown. but you might be acting like you're 4. See the difference? Or I've had a woman say to me one time, she used cuss words when she said it, but she said, I'm grown. Good. That's really wonderful. But that has nothing to do with your soul. Your body growth has nothing to do with your soul. What you graduated at school, if you were, if you have a doctorate, it doesn't matter when it comes to arrested development. That area is still sitting there waiting to be resolved. And when we relive it, we get all the sensations of that age group, and we act out and do stuff that's actually embarrassing, that we feel like, man, I don't want anybody to find that out. I'm way too smart to be that dumb. You ever think that? Oh my gosh, I'm way too smart to be that stupid. I've done stuff in life where in my conversation, I said something reflective, or I said something, and it came back, and later I thought about it, and it was like, man, after having run a preschool and different things like that, I realized I was acting like I was 5. And it's so out of character for me, because my most adult self doesn't act that way. My most adult self feels satisfied within, knows if something, the end of the thought is a period, an exclamation point, a comma, well, what are we doing? It's slower and it figures things out a little bit differently. But that childlike part of me acts out, can scream, can just go total sass, can fall apart really easy, has no stamina. No, it'll start being accusational or whatever. Those are not adult behaviors. A lot of times we'll say, well, that I was just mad. That's why I said that or did that. Well, sure, you were just angry, but you said that or did that because you felt like it, right? We're 100% responsible for our own behaviors. Please write that down. It's something that the child within us hates, that phrase. Well, we're 100% responsible for our own behaviors. We can't blame it on other people. We either lost control when we've done something, or we wanted to, or both. And when that takes place, now we can't blame it on somebody else. One of the biggest childhood things that we have to grow out of is the concept of I can blame everyone else. Or we'll see people take the blame for everyone else. You don't own what doesn't belong to you, right? Something happens with the neighbor's car. I don't go around apologizing. I'm sorry about what happened in the neighbor's car and the accident. I'm sorry I somehow caused that. Not my thing. Wasn't in the vehicle. Wasn't driving. Why am I owning something that doesn't belong to me? Keep that in mind. And then why don't we own something that belongs to us? Well, this is where we have to figure out what actually belongs to us and where were we acting like a child. So we're going to get more into this in the next session, and because this is a big concept. This is one of those things that sometimes people fall apart just after listening to something like this. And so that's my disclosure to you. Please don't stop listening. But note that if that happens, that's the child within you that has been under so much pressure because you're trying to live this adult life, but you're doing it as a 10-year-old, as a 7-year-old, as a 12-year-old. And that's a lot of pressure. The components that are missing will help to carry you into problem solving in a whole different way. And I want to see that happen for you. I know God has done that so much with me, but I still find areas I'm arrested in development. I've had a lot of trauma happen to me. And my adult self sometimes will look or hear me say something, that child within me say something, and I'm like, what was that? Now that I know what it is, it's like, that's a little bit embarrassing. That was way younger than my age group. That was out of character for me. So then I have to dig and say, what was that attached to? Why did I feel the way I felt? And how did it come out of me like that? So we'll get into that in the next podcast. And I hope you'll hang with us because once you open this can, it's really hard to shove it all back in. So please make sure if you watch this first one that you'll also go into the next ones because in order for us to face this and to grow, we have to have this information. And also, when we face this and we grow, it's going to take a bit, right? We're going back into areas that happened a long time ago, bringing clarification, reframing, repositioning them in our heart, and giving them to God.